I knew I was done the moment I saw HR sitting too close to the door. The conference room screen was already on. My name sat there in the center like it had been waiting. No agenda. No small talk. My manager didn't ask me to sit. He didn't ask anything at all. He just closed the door behind me and said he didn't accept what I'd done and that I had 1 week. I tried to speak anyway. That reflex you get when you still believe explanations matter. I started with the coffee. The old man. The lobby. 3 minutes in the morning. That was it. No favors. No conversations. Just a cup set down, a nod, and me walking back to my desk before my screen even went to sleep. My name is Calla Whitmore. I am 42 years old. That thought hit me right then, standing there while my manager watched me like I was already gone. 42 is old enough to know when a meeting isn't a meeting. 42 is old enough to recognize when a decision has already been approved somewhere else. HR slid a folder across the table. It was already open. My signature line was highlighted. I noticed security through the glass, pretending to look at their phones. I noticed my manager never once looked at me. He just repeated the line about policy, about optics, about how it didn't matter that the man never asked me for anything. What I didn't say out loud was that the coffee was already in an email, that someone had taken the time to describe my 3 minutes like a violation. What I didn't know yet was that the report had been sent before this meeting was ever scheduled. He turned the screen toward me then. A calendar, a date, the word termination written clean and calm like it was a dentist appointment. Approved, past tense. I stopped talking. There was nothing left to add. Somewhere in the building, the lobby clock ticked toward 7:13. I pictured the chair where the old man sat, empty now, probably. Or maybe not. Either way, it didn't matter to them. This story is a work of fiction created by the writing team at RevengeAITA. As I reached for the folder, one thought kept looping, louder than everything else. And it was the first time fear actually settled in instead of shock if the decision was already made. Why pretend this was a warning? I didn't go back to my desk after the meeting. I stood by the copy machine because it gave me something to do with my hands. I kept feeding blank paper through it, over and over, like the noise might drown out what had just happened. Someone said my name. Soft. Careful. It was Jenna. She worked my shift when I covered nights last winter. She didn't meet my eyes. She never did when things were about to go wrong. She told me the report didn't come from management. She said it fast, like she was ripping off a bandage. She said it came from the floor, from someone who saw me crossing boundaries. She didn't say my name after that. She just stared at the blinking light on the copier. I waited for the rest, an apology, an explanation, anything that made sense. She said layoffs were coming. She said people were being ranked. She said she didn't think it would go this far. Her voice cracked on that last part, like that was supposed to matter. I told her I covered her shifts because she had a kid at home. I told her it was coffee. I told her 3 minutes didn't change anything. She flinched at the word coffee, like it was a weapon. That's when it hit me how clean it must have felt to hand my name over and step back into line. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just walked away before she could say anything else that would stick. In the lobby, the old man was already there. Same chair, same time. 7:13 on the clock behind him. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the cup. I started talking, too fast, explaining policies like they were spells I could cast backward. He listened for maybe 10 seconds. Then he raised one finger. Not rude, not gentle, just final. Stop, he said. I kept going anyway. About the meeting, about the week, about how I didn't do anything wrong. He leaned forward then, closer than he ever had, and said I didn't need to convince anyone who'd already decided. Why would someone with nothing to lose tell me to stay quiet? He took the cup from my hands and set it down like the shaking annoyed him. People reveal themselves when they think no one's watching, he said, and looked past me toward the elevators. When I turned, Jenna was standing there, pretending to check her phone, waiting to see if I'd say her name out loud. I came down early the next morning, earlier than usual, like getting there first might change something. The old man was already in his chair, and he always was. Same coat, same posture, like time bent around him instead of the other way. I handed him the coffee and told myself not to talk. I failed immediately. I said I was drafting an email, careful wording, professional tone. I said I was going to explain context, intent, precedent, all the words that used to work when people still pretended to listen. He took a slow sip and asked if the review window was 10 business days or calendar days. I froze. I hadn't said anything about timelines. I hadn't said anything about reviews at all. He set the cup down and corrected himself. Like he was fixing a typo. Said it didn't matter anyway. Most places locked decisions by day 5. I laughed. A short, stupid sound. Asked where he worked before he retired. He told me manufacturing, then logistics. Then he paused and said consulting. Actually, the answers didn't line up, not even a little. When I pointed that out, he shrugged like it was weather. I told him I was sending the email after lunch. He leaned back and shook his head once. Not dramatic, just done. Said emails like that didn't protect people like me. Said they became exhibits. Said the tone would be used against me no matter how clean it sounded. I asked how he knew that. He didn't answer. He asked if I'd ever noticed who survived layoffs and who didn't. Asked who got to explain themselves and who just disappeared. Why was he trying to stop me from saving myself? I stood up too fast. My chair scraped. People looked. I didn't care. I said he was wrong. I said staying quiet was how people got erased. He looked at me then. Really looked. Not kind, not cruel, just accurate. He said sometimes silence wasn't surrender. Sometimes it was leverage. I told him he didn't get to decide that for me. He nodded. Like that was the point. Like I just passed or failed something and didn't know which yet. As I walked away, my phone buzzed. An email draft auto-saved. HR added to the thread. I hadn't sent anything. Not yet. HR called me back in before lunch. Same room, same folder, different energy. This time they didn't pretend it was a conversation. The woman across from me tapped her pen against the table and said my name like it was already past tense. She said my termination was effective immediately. She said access would be revoked by end of day. She said it wasn't personal. I asked why the meeting had been scheduled weeks ago. Her pen stopped. She said decisions like this required preparation. She said patterns mattered. She said my name had been flagged months earlier during a risk review. Not for performance. For friction. I asked what that meant. She said I asked too many questions. She said I didn't escalate properly. She said I pushed back in meetings where alignment was expected. She said helping the man in the lobby just made the paperwork easier. I laughed before I could stop myself. Not because it was funny, because it finally made sense. Another person came in then. Younger, too confident. He slid a document toward me and said the phrase swift resolution like it was something to be proud of. He said teams were being rewarded for decisive action. He didn't say the word bonus, but it hung there anyway. They asked me to sign. I asked about my file. They told me partner firms would be notified. Standard practice, risk mitigation. They didn't use the word blacklist, but they didn't have to. So what was the point of blaming the old man at all if I was already marked? No one answered that. They just waited. I signed because refusing would have changed nothing except how long they sat there. When I stood up, my badge stopped working before I reached the door. The lobby was quiet when I passed through. Too quiet. The chair by the wall was empty. No coat, no cup, no sign he'd been there at all. I paused long enough for security to notice. As I stepped outside, my phone buzzed. A system notification. Access terminated. Another followed right after. External contacts restricted. Whatever this really was, it had moved past me. I found out from the building desk. Not a phone call. Not an email. The guard stopped me before I reached the elevators and asked if I was here about the man from the lobby. He didn't wait for my answer. He said there'd been an ambulance earlier that morning. Said the chair was being cleared out. I asked when. He said yesterday. Early. I said nothing. He handed me a small envelope he'd been told to give me if I came by. No return address. My name written like someone had tried not to shake. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. Not finished. Not signed. Just words that stopped halfway down the page. He wrote about watching people choose. About how policies revealed more than character statements ever did. About timing. About patience. Then a line I read 3 times because my brain kept rejecting it. You weren't the first. My hands went numb. I leaned against the counter because the floor felt too far away. I asked the guard if anyone else had asked about him. He hesitated. Said a few names came up over the years of people who stopped coming, people who used to sit where he sat. He said most of them didn't work in the building anymore, said he never saw them again. How many people broke before I did? I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope, like that might make it less real. When I looked up, the guard had already turned away. The desk phone rang. He answered it like nothing had happened. Outside, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, no message. Just a missed call and a voicemail notification I didn't open yet. I stood there longer than I should have. Then my phone buzzed again. Same number. This time, a text followed. We need to speak. Not here. Whatever he left unfinished wasn't done with me yet. They showed up 2 days after the letter. I wasn't supposed to be in the building anymore, but my badge still worked on the side entrance. I told myself I was just grabbing a notebook I'd left behind. That was a lie. I wanted to see if my name was still poison. I heard the voices before I saw them. Calm. Measured. The kind that didn't rush because it didn't need to. 2 men stood near reception. Jacket still on, talking to security like they owned the floor without saying it. One of them asked for governance records. Another asked who had approved recent terminations. No one said my name. I stepped closer. Too close. A woman from legal caught my arm and steered me aside like it was instinct. She told me, quietly, that I shouldn't be there. She told me not to speak to anyone. She told me this wasn't about me. I laughed under my breath. That earned me a look sharp enough to shut it down. She lowered her voice and said, if I talked, even casually, I could compromise things I didn't understand yet. She said silence was in my best interest. She said my best interest had legal definitions now. What kind of justice requires the person who got burned to pretend nothing happened? The lawyers passed us without a glance. They didn't ask who I was. They didn't care. That hurt more than if they had. Then a third man came in through the front doors, younger, tired in a way that didn't come from missing sleep. He stopped when he saw the empty chair by the wall. He didn't ask about it. He didn't have to. He looked at me like he knew exactly who I was. My grandfather sat here, he said, not accusing, not gentle, just stating a fact that landed heavy between us. Legal went still. Security shifted. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't offer condolences. He just nodded once and followed the lawyers toward the elevators. The woman from legal let go of my arm. She told me to go home. She told me someone would contact me. As the doors closed, the younger man looked back, not at them, at me. And for the first time since this started, I knew for sure this wasn't finished. He asked me to meet him somewhere quiet. Not his office, not the building. A conference room borrowed from a law firm that didn't put its name on the door. He didn't offer coffee. He didn't sit until I did. He said his grandfather had owned enough shares to stop things. Eventually, not immediately. He said intervention without proof would have warned the wrong people. He said the company had learned how to clean itself whenever power moved too fast. I told him that sounded convenient. He didn't argue. He said it was cruel. He said it worked. He slid a folder toward me and didn't touch it again. Inside were notes, dates, names I recognized from old email threads that had gone quiet, people who had left suddenly, people who stopped replying. I asked if they were fired too. He said some were, some quit. Some took buyouts that came with silence. He said my record was clean. No warnings, no write-ups, just a few meeting notes where I'd pushed back on timelines and asked for clarification when everyone else nodded. Enough to mark me. Not enough to protect me. I asked why me. He said I sat low enough to be disposable and visible enough to be useful. He said helping his grandfather gave them the excuse they needed. He said my termination triggered a clause buried deep in governance language that allowed the board to suspend leadership pending review. What kind of system needs someone to be sacrificed before it can be fixed? I stood up. My hands were shaking again. But I didn't hide them. I told him I lost my job. I told him my name was flagged. I told him people stopped answering my calls. Like he didn't apologize. He said apologies didn't undo leverage. He said this was the part where it got worse before it got honest. He stood then. Finally, he said the review had started. He said executives were already lawyering up. He said my silence mattered now more than ever. When I reached the door, he told me one last thing. My firing had locked the process in. There was no going back for them. As I walked out, my phone buzzed. A new message from legal. Subject line cooperation parameters. The email from legal was polite in the way threats usually are. Cooperation parameters. Bullet points. Time windows. Words like non-disparagement and confidentiality stacked neatly like they'd never ruined anyone's life. I closed it, opened it again, closed it harder. The reporter didn't use my name. I didn't offer it. We talked through an encrypted app someone had recommended with a half joke about burner phones and paranoia. She didn't ask how I felt. She asked for timelines. She asked for language from emails. She asked how fast leadership moved once my termination was approved. I told her everything I was allowed to remember. And a little more. She paused when I mentioned the empty chair in the lobby. She asked me to repeat the time. She asked who else had been there. Her typing slowed. That's when I knew this wasn't small. My phone rang before the article went live. Legal again. This time, not polite. They told me I'd violated the spirit of our agreement. They said consequences were still being evaluated. They said settlements depended on trust. I said I hadn't signed anything yet. Silence on the line. Then a reminder about leverage. About how easily things could disappear if I made this harder than it needed to be. What good is protection if it only exists when you behave? The article hit an hour later. No headline about me. Just governance failures. Patterns. Words like systemic and deliberate. My inbox exploded anyway. Missed calls. Messages that didn't say my name but felt like they were shouting it. The younger man texted once. Just one line. You weren't supposed to do that. I typed back and erased it. Typed again. Erased again. Finally sent nothing. By evening, the tone changed. Legal didn't threaten anymore. They asked if I was safe. They asked if I'd spoken to anyone else. They asked if I was willing to clarify a few points for regulators who suddenly had questions. I said yes before they finished the sentence. When I put the phone down, my hands were steady for the first time in days. Outside, another unknown number lit up my screen. This one left a voicemail. It was from the board. They wanted a meeting. The board meeting didn't feel dramatic. No shouting, no slam tables. Just faces that had practiced neutrality for years and finally ran out of room to hide. They didn't thank me. That would have been strange. They didn't apologize either. That came later. In writing. Reviewed by counsel. Signed by someone who would not be there much longer. The chief executive was placed on immediate leave. Not suspended. Removed. The phrasing mattered. So did the follow-up regulatory fines. Personal liability. Barred from holding board seats for the next several years. I watched him process that in real time. The smile he used in town halls didn't survive the sentence. Human resources went next. The director tried to frame it as miscommunication. The word oversight got used. Then the audit summary came out and the room shifted. Investigations, termination, cooperation agreements. Her badge was deactivated before the meeting ended. The coworker didn't get a meeting. She got a calendar invite that vanished mid-morning. Restructuring announcement. Position eliminated. No farewell email. I didn't feel relief. Just something cold and quiet where anger used to be. The company agreed to penalties. Leadership replacement. Governance oversight. External review that would last longer than any of us wanted to think about. My lawyer slid papers toward me and waited. Settlement amount spelled out in full. Blacklist cleared by formal letter. Written apology acknowledging wrongful termination and reputational harm. It all looked very clean on the page. What does revenge look like when it isn't personal? I signed because it was smart, not because it felt good. When I stood to leave, one of the board members stopped me and said they hoped I'd consider returning once things stabilized. I told them no without raising my voice. Outside, my phone buzzed. The younger man again? Just a single word this time. Done. I didn't reply. I walked past the building without slowing down, already thinking about what came next and whether any version of going back would ever feel like anything other than pretending. The offer came through my lawyer. Reinstatement, same title, same pay band. A new manager. A clause that said we'd all move forward professionally. There was another clause. Permanent, non-disclosure, non-disparagement, silence. Forever. I told my lawyer no before she finished reading it out loud. My former boss asked for a meeting anyway. We sat across from each other in a borrowed office. No witnesses, no raised voices. He said the company had learned from its mistakes. He said my return would send a positive message. I said my name had already been used enough. He waited for anger or forgiveness. I gave him neither. I told him I was done negotiating my dignity for stability. He nodded like he understood. He didn't. The money landed 2 weeks later, enough to breathe, enough to reset. References came with it, carefully worded, legally clean. My record followed me again instead of running from me. I took a job in a different industry. Smaller, less impressive on paper. The kind of place where people answered emails without fear. No lobby chair, no watchers, just work that stayed at work when the day ended. I ran into my old boss once after that. Grocery store aisle. He looked smaller, older. He opened his mouth like he wanted closure. I walked past him. Here's what I learned the hard way. If a system needs your silence to function, it isn't fixed. And if keeping your job requires shrinking yourself, it was never really yours to begin with. I didn't win everything. I didn't keep my old life, but I kept my name, my boundaries, and the ability to sleep without replaying conversations in my head. If you stayed with me through this, little thank you. I know these stories hit close for a lot of people. If you've been through something similar, I'd like to hear how you handled it. And if you want more stories like this, you know where to find them. They lost their power. I got my name back. That's the end of it.